9/11. Ultimately, well, they did this to us, so we can do whatever. If 9/11 was seriously looked at and seriously addressed, it would put an end to the wars that are based on it. It would have to. And the other abuses. Well, I want to talk about my history with 9/11. Basically, it started about 10 minutes to 6 a.m. on September 11th, 2001, Pacific time. We're 3 hours earlier than the East Coast, and I got a call from my best friend, Michael, who has since died. He perished in a fire a few years ago. But he called me up and he told me that a plane had hit one of the World Trade Center buildings. And, it was early in the morning. I didn't know if it was a joke or what. I was imagining, some little plane. And I made a really, a kind of rude comment probably. I was like, gee, that must suck for the people in the building. Didn't know what was going on. And I turned on the Howard Stern show. And they were talking about it there live, what was going on. I didn't have a TV at the time. About an hour later, I brought a TV into my room and this is falling off. And started watching what was going on. And I remember that day, I said to my roommate, I was skeptical of what was going on that day. I remember watching the towers go down, and it was so traumatic, but it just looked wrong, and it was such a weird thing, but I was skeptical from that day. And then 3 days later, I got a call from my mom. She told me that my Uncle Mickey was on Flight 93. And they kind of changed everything, it was very weird. About a week before, I hadn't seen Mickey in years and years, maybe 10 years, maybe 13 years, and I hadn't thought about him very much recently. And about a week before 9/11, he just flashed into my mind, and I thought of something that he said to me when I was a little kid that cracked me up, that, he had me laughing, just rolling on the floor laughing. I must have been about 6 or 7, and I just thought of that out of the blue and started laughing. Again, I can't tell you what it is, but then a week later, to hear about him being on Flight 93 just out of the blue was just very, very strange. And so, I was kind of going on 2 different tracks after 9/11 because I was skeptical. I was skeptical of this Bush government. I'd been researching misdeeds of the government for quite a while, so I was just naturally skeptical of what we were being told. But at the same time, I was kind of getting wrapped up in some of the propaganda that they were giving us. Just showing the towers coming down over and over again. There were flags everywhere. And it was just kind of going along like that, getting wrapped up in that. Until January 2002, and I got a copy of the daily paper and brought it home. This is the photograph that was on the cover of the paper, and it just really made me sick. I just got this feeling in my gut, I just got pure evil out of this picture. These are the first prisoners that were brought to Camp X-Ray in Guantanamo Bay. And when I saw this, I think I started crying. It just hit me in the gut. I knew something was wrong. And from that moment on, I started really looking into to what people were saying, information, research that was going on. I know at that point, Mike Rupert had given a lecture that was put on videotape, and people were starting to do research like right away. And I started looking into it and seeing that I wasn't the only person who had questions and who was skeptical of what was going on. There were some local people who were getting active and doing stuff about it. There's a woman named Carol Brier who I think she may have done the first street action for 9/11 Truth. She led a little march to Senator Dianne Feinstein's office in San Francisco, and I believe that was in January It was probably around the time I saw this picture, and I ended up contacting her later in the year and asking her if there was anything I could do to help out, because I saw that she was getting active, and so we did. I participated in my first street action for 9/11 Truth. It was right before the first anniversary of 9/11 in Oakland, California, and then later in San Francisco. And shortly after that, we started what I think was the first real-time activist group for 9/11 Truth. It's the Northern California 9/11 Truth Alliance, and that's still going on to this day. I did a public access television show that ran for about 2.5 years. And the Truth Movement just started. It wasn't called the 9/11 Truth Movement at all. It was people who were questioning 9/11. And really, the family members who were trying to get some kind of accountability from the government for this crime. I mean, usually, if something happens, there's some kind of investigation, inquiry, something. With 9/11, the biggest crime that anyone had ever seen, and there was nothing at all. And they had to push. I mean, if you know the story, probably a lot of you here have seen Press for Truth, which tells the story of the widows and other family members who are pushing for some kind of accountability from the government, and finally got this whitewash commission that the members of which have even said that they were set up to fail. They had their hands tied. They weren't really trying to assign blame. So, and a lot of material was left out of that. It was basically a whitewash. So people kept pursuing answers about 9/11, and the movement kept building and building. I would say that the most people who've been out in the street at one time in one place for 9/11 Truth was probably in New York City on the anniversary in 2006. And this is a picture from that. And at that point, it was reaching like such a peak. There was like such an energy. And I want to address this. I'll address this a little later, but I want to talk about the state of the movement today and progress and what that looks like and what we're really doing. Because, like I say, 3 years ago we probably had the most people in one place for 9/11 Truth out in the street. But I think that we are expanding and reaching out and becoming more stronger and pervasive in other ways, and it's really not about getting as many people as possible in one place. So in December of that year, there was an event that they planned in Boston called the Boston Tea Party for 9/11 Truth, and it was kind of a takeoff on the original Boston Tea Party, where the colonists threw boxes of tea into the harbor dressed as Indians. It was a bit of a false flag activism there, but it was based on this. So we're throwing boxes that are made to look like boxes of the 9/11 Commission report, throwing it over, and it picked up in a bunch of different locations, and so maybe 7 different cities in the United States decided to join the activists in Boston to do this action, and it was a great thing. It was the first time that there'd really been that kind of like spontaneous, simultaneous actions for 9/11 Truth. And after that happened, I felt strongly that we would really benefit from doing that on a regular basis, basically, taking action together at the same time in locations all over the place. And I put my mind to that and, asked a couple of other people what they thought, and basically came up with the idea of doing a once-a-month action, a regular action that wouldn't stop until we get justice for the crimes of 9/11. It was a pretty obvious thing to do it on the 11th of each month, and so that's what we decided to do.